Hollow Creek was the kind of town that people forgot about as soon as they left. Nestled deep in the hills, it wasn't on any maps, at least not any official ones. The roads to it were narrow and overgrown, and the buildings had a way of blending into the landscape, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim them. It wasn't that Hollow Creek was evil. Exactly, it was just forgotten, except for the ones who didn't leave. Sarah had heard the rumors, of course. A small town with a history full of strange disappearances, rumors of voices in the night, and a fog that rolled in every evening like clockwork. But Sarah had grown tired of the city, of the noise and the constant rush, and Hollow Creek, with its promise of peace and isolation, had seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. The locals were friendly enough, but there was an oddness to them, a way they smiled that didn't quite reach their eyes. They were always polite, always kind, but there was a distance, a wariness, like they were waiting for something to happen, or perhaps waiting for someone to leave. Sarah rented a small cottage on the edge of town. It was charming in a rundown, forgotten kind of way. The creaky floors and drafty windows added to its character, or so she told herself, but it was the attic that caught her attention. The landlord had warned her not to go up there, but his warning had been too casual, almost dismissive. "Nothing up there, miss," he'd said, scratching at his beard. "Just old junk, and maybe a few rats." Sarah had laughed it off at first, but there was something about the attic that called to her, something buried beneath the layers of dust and cobwebs. Late one evening, unable to sleep, she found herself standing before the door. It was locked, just as the landlord had promised, but she had found the key hidden under the loose floorboard in the kitchen, as though it had been waiting for her. Her heart thudded in her chest as she unlocked the door and stepped into the attic. The space was small, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew. Boxes of old newspapers, moth-eaten blankets, and rusted tools lined the walls. But there, in the corner, was something that caught her eye, a large, ornate mirror, covered in a dusty sheet. It was out of place, she realized. All the other items were simple, utilitarian, but this mirror was different. Intricate carvings adorned its wooden frame, and it gleamed faintly in the dim light. It was almost as if it had been waiting for her. With trembling hands, Sarah pulled off the sheet. The mirror's surface shimmered for a moment, and then nothing. She looked at her reflection, just the ordinary image of a woman in her late 20s, dark hair tangled, wearing her pajamas. But then, as her eyes lingered, something began to change. Behind her reflection, the room seemed to warp, the shadows deepened, and the edges of the glass twisted, distorting the familiar attic into something darker, older. The floorboards beneath her feet cracked, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange, rhythmic vibration. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the reflection of herself began to change. Her own image began to move independently, as if the woman in the mirror was no longer mimicking her movements. The mirrored version of Sarah tilted her head slightly, her expression turning into something colder, more predatory. Then, her reflection, the reflection smiled. A chill crept up Sarah's spine. She stepped back, heart pounding in her chest. But the reflection stayed where it was, smiling, waiting. Suddenly, the door to the attic slammed shut behind her. Sarah spun around, panic rising in her throat. But there was nothing there. The attic was silent, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. She rushed to the door, but it refused to budge. Her mind raced. How long had she been in here? And then, in the stillness, she heard it. A whisper, faint, but unmistakable. "You should have left when you had the chance." Sarah's heart stopped. She spun back toward the mirror, her blood running cold as she saw the reflection of herself, standing behind her, real this time. The woman in the mirror was no longer a reflection. She was a presence, a figure that moved, her eyes dark with malice, her mouth stretching into a grin that was too wide, too wrong. The air in the attic grew thick, suffocating, and the shadows seemed to crawl toward her, like dark fingers reaching from the walls. Sarah reached for the mirror, driven by some primal instinct to end whatever madness was unfolding in front of her. Her fingertips brushed the glass, and the world tilted. In a flash, the attic was gone. She was standing in a dark street now, lit only by the pale glow of the streetlights. But the air, it was wrong. The street, the houses, the trees, they all felt like a twisted version of Hollow Creek. And then, she saw them. The people of the town, or what was left of them, standing in the street, their faces obscured by shadow. They were all watching her, unmoving. Their eyes were hollow, empty, silent. They hadn't aged a day in 10 years, their clothes the same as when Sarah had first arrived. And as she turned to run, the whisper followed her. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, Sarah. You'll never leave." She stumbled backward, her heart hammering in her chest. The reflection in the mirror had pulled her into the town's curse. Hollow Creek wasn't a place anyone escaped from. No one had ever left. And now, neither would Sarah. The next morning, the landlord came to check on the cottage. The door to the attic was wide open. The mirror was gone. And the house, like every house in Hollow Creek, seemed a little emptier than before. But the townspeople smiled their quiet smiles, as if nothing had changed. They knew better than anyone. No one ever really leaves Hollow Creek. Not once they've seen the reflection.